How's it going, everybody? It's Jeff Mann with Team Reeling the Blues. Well, I'm getting ready to put the splash well in this boat. I've done a few alterations to the splash well where I actually raised it up from the bottom here to the top and a couple other little things. But I got it all fitted and got everything right where I want it to go. But before I put it in, while I've got all the room I need to hook up these pumps, I'm going to go ahead and wire my pumps. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a basic overview of the way I do my boats. Every boat I've ever owned, the first thing I done was pretty much took all the wiring loose on the pumps. I'm prior military, so one thing I do like is a redundant system. Otherwise, I like a backup for my backup for my backup. And anytime I have anything like a bilge pump or a bait tank pump or even a live well pump, I want it serviceable. I want to be able to get to it. I want to be able to service it out on the water. I do a lot of tournament fishing, and that can be a death blow to have a live well pump go out when you have a lot of big fish. Not exaggerating, about 4 years ago during a tournament, hadn't really been doing any good. Then all of a sudden, bam, had a 35-pound flathead. Put him in the live well, turned the live well pump on, nothing. Checked the wiring was good, the pump had burned up. So what did I do? I had another pump underneath the dash. I grabbed that pump, stuck it in the same fitting. Took me about 5 minutes to swap it out, and I had fresh water going to my fish, which was a good thing because 5 minutes after I got the pump hooked up, we had another rod go down. It was another 30-pound plus flathead, and before we got it in the boat, we had another 30-pound flathead. So essentially, we put 100 pounds in the boat in about a 15-minute period, and if I hadn't had that extra pump, I might have left to go get a pump, or I may have tried to sit there and put water inside the tank with a bucket to try to keep the fish alive, but it'd been a hard task to keep 3 fish, 100 pounds of fish alive for another 4.5 hours during a tournament. But anyway, back to what we're doing here. What I always do on every boat I've ever had, I always have a backup for the pumps. I always keep up a backup bilge pump, and I always keep a backup live well pump. Now, normally I always try to keep all my pumps the same size, same make, everything. That way, you only have to carry one spare. Just so happened I bought a different style of live well pump for this side here. The main reason why is because it came with all the stuff I needed to make the live well work. So I have 2 extra pumps. I have one for this one, I have one for this one. But let's go back to what I do here. I always put quick connects on my wiring. That's one thing I always do because I don't want to have to get a razor knife out, start cutting wires, splicing wires, taping wires. I'd rather everything be done with a quick connect. And the way I do that is I always use a ground bus bar. And I don't know if you can see it in the video, but this is a ground bus bar. If you notice, it has 2 lugs, one on each end. And this is all continuous. So essentially what you have is you can hook a ground coming from your battery to right here. And it makes all these lugs ground. I don't like stacking grounds. Otherwise, you'll see people on these older boats, they'll have one ground wire, and they were or one ground screw, and they'll have like 5 ground wires on that same screw. You can't get a good connection that way. The most I'll ever go is 2 under a screw, and I try not to even do that. I try to keep it at 1. If I have to go 2 under a screw, what I'll normally do is take those 2 and put a splicer on it and connect those 2 wires and then hook it to it. That way, when you torque this down, you've got good compression, and you won't have any problem with I call it a leak, but you won't have any problem with that wire getting loose. If it ever gets loose, it's going to start corroding, and it's going to start giving you a bad signal to your whatever piece you got it on, a pump, a live well, a trolling motor. It don't matter. What most people don't realize, what goes bad on a boat 90% of the time is the ground wire. It's not the hot wire. So we always use a ground bus bar. And I always, back here I've got 3 pumps and I got a light. So since I got 3 pumps and a light, what I've got here is I've got might as well say it's a bus bar, but if you'll notice, these are all isolated. So this one, this one, this one, this one are all separate, but they're connected side to side. And the reason why I like that, I can take this, mount it, let's say right here. It's not where I'm gonna mount it, but I can mount it right here close to the pumps. I'm actually gonna mount it over here. I can mount it close to the pumps. I can run the hot wire from each pump to a different section right here. So if I can run this hot wire to this side, then, well, I'll probably bring it up and hook it on this side, and I'll show you why in a second. But I can run it up, hook it to right here, take my next pump, hook it to the next one, next pump, hook it to the next one, next pump, hook it to the next one. So all 4 of them are in line here. All 4 of them are isolated. They're not connected. But then I can run my wire from the console back here to the back, pump 1 up here, run pump 1 right here. Now this is the connection. So if I ever have an issue, let's say the pump goes bad, I can literally take 1 screw out of this side, pull the connector, take 1 screw out of the ground bar, pull the connector, it's completely loose. That would take literally 30 seconds. My other pump already has the connections on it, already has the clip that I need to connect it right back up. I can literally slide it in, torque the screw down, slide in, torque the screw down, I'm back in business. So I switched out that pump literally in less than a minute. I've got a new pump in the boat. So these are a must. But another thing that this is good for, like I say, all these are isolated. I know if you're a boater, you've had a pump, or excuse me, you've had a switch go bad or a wire go bad going back to a pump. Your pump's working, but your switch don't work, or the wire going back here is compromised. You don't have time to fix that wire coming back. The beauty of this little connection right here is, let's say it's your bilge pump, the switch quit working, you can't get it to work, rather than pulling the whole thing loose underneath the console, you can literally loosen that screw, move it down to a different terminal, connect it right back down, flip that switch, now you've got your bilge pump working. Now, I know you have to disconnect something to do it, but essentially it still takes you 30 seconds to move that wire to here. Now you've got a good power source again. Like I say, these are a must. I do it on every boat I have just to make everything quick and easy to fix. So let me show you how to make my connections. Okay, so here's a little bit better look at what we was talking about earlier. This is the ground bar. If you notice, it's all continuous, so anytime you hook any of these screws together, it bonds them all together. With most boats, especially aluminum boats, you do not want to use the body of the boat as a ground. Yes, the body of the boat is grounded because everything that's hooked to that motor kind of winds up with the ground just because of the motor. But problem is, anytime you put a ground anywhere on the boat, the ground is bonded to the aluminum, and the aluminum's a lot softer. So what ends up happening is you're using a screw to bond the ground to the boat. The screw is probably stainless or something like that. And what happens is you will start deteriorating the aluminum boat, and it will start drawing it toward the stainless. So essentially you get electrolysis, it's sucking all the soft metal off of your boat, and before you know it, you'll notice you got this stainless steel screw there, and also you start to get a ring around it, or you get pitting, and before you know it, you've got a hole eat out of the side of your boat. And on the other hand, if you use it in salt or even heavy mineraled water, what ends up happening, your boat turns into a giant conductor, so you get electrolysis from end to end, so it starts sucking the metal away, and it actually just deposits in the water, and you start getting holes or pinholes or little corroded spots all along the boat where it looks like somebody literally just scooped off part of the aluminum. So it's always best to have the ground go all the way back to the battery. So with this, you can see what I got. I'll take one lead, run it from the battery to one of these lugs. When I run it to this lug, then it'll ground everything on this screw. Okay, so here's how I wire. Now, you'll see a couple people use a couple different types of connectors. I call this a ringlet, but you can see it's closed. It's a closed end. I don't like to use these on anything that, like these, where I can switch it out or change it out quick. I don't like to use this style. And the reason why is because you have to take the screw completely out to put this on or to take this off. And you know what'll happen. The minute you take that screw all the way out, it's going to fall in the boat, you're going to lose it, or there's a chance of it, so it's really not worth the risk. So what I always use is I just use an open end connector like this right here, call it a fork connector, and this is what I use. Reason why, all you got to do is loosen that screw, and you can pull it out, stick the next one in it, boom, you're right back in service, it's working again. And like I was talking about earlier, so if you have a pump go bad, all you got to do is loosen the screw, pull it off, put your new pump in, put it right back in, tighten it down, boom, you're right back in power, everything's working. Or, look, like we talked about earlier, if the wire coming to this is actually bad, then all you got to do is take the wire, the hot feed that's coming to this side or whatever side it's on, take that wire loose, since you know it's bad, and then just move this hot connector to a different terminal. So if this wire's bad, you can just take this wire loose right here, take the connector loose, move it up to a different screw. Yeah, of course, now you've got a dead circuit, because now if you flip this on, both of these come on, but no big deal. If you're in an emergency and you need a bilge pump that works, rather than trying to run an all new wire to it, just put it right here, take whatever you got here, pull it out, stick this in, fire it up. That way you've got a way of, again, making it work again. It's a redundant system. I like to have those. I like to have a backup for my backup. So if I have a bad wire coming from the switch, I'll just move it to a different terminal and use a different switch. If I have a bad pump, I'll just take it loose, put the new pump right back in the same terminal, tighten it down. Again, I can switch any of these out in 30 seconds with no problem. Let's get to how I make my connections. So this is tinned wire. Tinned wire means it's already got a solder on the wire, and what it does is it seals up the copper, a lot less likely to corrode. A lot of your smaller gauge wire on boats, that's what they use. It makes the wire a little bit more rigid, but that's no big deal. So what we got here, I'm going to strip it using a stripper. Try to use the right size. You don't want to cut any of your strands. The more strands you cut, then the more chance are of you having a power drop or something like that. And what I always do, I always run it through the connector, and I always fold mine over and I solder them in. Now I'll use my pliers and I'll crimp it, but I like to solder it. So this is brown. On these pumps, brown is the hot wire, black is your ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stick me a piece of the heat shrink on it. And what this does, it helps protect the wire. It's easy to do, just slide it over. I like to use two pieces. I'll use a smaller piece and then I'll use the second piece to go over the top of it. So you do this, it's nice and clean. Put the connector on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it up like that. Crimp it just a little bit. Like I say, this crimp is not what's actually holding it. The crimp is just there to hold it temporarily. What I always do is I use solder. This is electrical solder, so it's not plumbing solder, it's electrical solder. It's already got a flux built into it, and it makes for a real nice connection. I use one of these style torches. Really easy to use. Lock it in, and it's really a quick, simple process. And you can use a soldering iron if you don't have one of these, or if you're in an area where you're afraid of having an open flame. You put that thing on there, and then you just touch it. That's it. Now, the reason why this is better than using a crimp, now this solder has got all the way up inside that connector. That connector is completely watertight where it's connected there. Now, all I gotta do is slide this heat shrink right up there. Shrink it down. You don't want to apply the heat directly to it because you can burn this stuff, and if you do, it ruins it. And then, like I say, I always double mine up, and the reason why is that way I can get a really good seal back here on the wire a little bit. Not necessary. It's just, that's me. And believe it or not, even after doing that, a lot of times I'll go ahead and wrap this in with tape, but you don't really need it. This thing's doubled up. You got a good watertight seal. Now, all I gotta do is once I mount these, I'll just put that in there, torque it down, and we're good to go. Here we go. It's all done. Didn't take, there we go. It's all done. It didn't really take that long. It took about 15 minutes to make these connections, and I made them nice and neat. You can see I added a piece of PVC, and that way everything's got a place to mount, and that way there's nothing actually being bonded to this aluminum. And on here, if you ever have an issue, at least it's not going to ground out or short out. And it makes it a whole lot easier to add these clamps to hold everything in place nice and neat. Now, as I always do, I always take and try to wire my stuff to where it goes from furthest away to closest. So essentially I know, I'll probably label them in case I ever get rid of the boat or if somebody else has to work on it. But I always know that the furthest away is going to be the top. So there's my top, there's my furthest pump, next pump, closest pump. Same way on the hot side. When I wire it, I'll know this is the furthest, middle, closest. Like I say, for me, that way I know everything's nice, neat, organized, and in case of emergency, I can get to it. Whenever you take and plan out wiring something, always plan it out where you can get to it if in case of emergency, and plan it out where it's easy for you to do and easy to inspect. This is about as simple as it gets. The splash well is going to be right here, so I should be able to see these wires with no problem, even with the splash well intact. No matter what I got here, I'm going to try to make these wires where I can see them. Everything turned out real nice. It shouldn't take that much longer to get everything finished up. Now that I got this part here done, now I'm going to go ahead and install the splash well, and once I get it installed, it'll be time to put the top caps on this boat and get her painted up. If you're enjoying what you're watching, please subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. I like seeing the feedback and the questions, and I'll try to answer them as soon as I possibly can. And always, thank you.